Hello tortilla warriors out there on the taco tubes, I'm Mr. Spork and these are Mr. Spork's hands. I'm back in front of you today because I have learned exactly how easy it is to make your own tortillas at home instead of buying the bag versions at the grocery store. Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to make a batch of these and it's going to take you an hour. And you're going to say, why in the world would I bother making my own tortillas when it takes this long? But you know what? You're going to trust me. You're going to make a second batch and all of a sudden it's going to be 45 minutes. And then the third batch, it's going to be half an hour. And after about the 6th or 7th dozen, you are going to become a tortilla master. You can knock these out. I do a batch of 8 at a time. It takes me about 20 minutes. And of course, like most things that you make at home, they taste a heck of a lot better than the stuff you're going to get in the bags at the grocery store. Now, don't get me wrong. If you've got a local tortilla in your neighborhood and you can buy them freshly made, by all means do. But out here in Eastern Canada, where it's not the most taco-aware part of the planet, we have to end up making our own if we want good flavor in them. Super easy to do, 4 ingredients, and I'm talking about flour tortillas today. There are corn tortillas, of course. I love corn tortillas. They're fabulous. You make them with this fresh corn masa, but they're a little bit trickier, so I'm going to start you off on the slightly simpler to make wheat tortillas, flour tortillas. We'll come back to the corn tortillas in another video. I've got hot water here, and it does need to be hot. There's some food science at play there. 115, 116 degrees, that's what we're after. I've got a teaspoon of salt. I want to stir that to dissolve it all the way. On the fat, I'm just using vegetable shortening here, which is perfectly acceptable. It'll make you very nice tortillas. Traditionally, they would use rendered pork fat, but again, out here, kind of hard to find the good rendered pork lard in the local grocery store. So I stick with vegetable shortening. If you've got the pork and you want to render your own lard, that's great. That's a whole nother video. If you can get freshly rendered pork lard, that's more traditional. But don't use butter. I've tried butter and it just doesn't taste right, quite honestly. So vegetable shortening is fine. 50 grams of the vegetable shortening in cubes, basically. The flour is all-purpose flour, nothing special there. That's 350 grams of the flour. And with this water, make sure that salt is all the way dissolved. And you know, you're probably saying to yourself, hey, Mr. Spork, I can go to the grocery store and get those fancy schmancy flavors like sun-dried tomato and spinach. You know what? You can do that too. If you want to make yourself some spinach, or if you want to make yourself sun-dried tomatoes, I use my personal favorite, red bell pepper. All you do is you take about half of a bell pepper, you put it in your super blender and you blend it down and you make yourself a fine not an emulsion, but I guess that would be a puree of whatever the flavor that you're trying to add to your tortillas, and use that as the liquid. You could do garlic, you could do dark chilies, you could do pepper if you wanted. If you're using something kind of tough like the sun-dried tomatoes or the chilies, go to boiling water and let those ingredients soak in the boiling water for 5 or 10 minutes so they'll soften up, and then run your blender. But today I'm just going to go with good old-fashioned plain flour tortillas. With the fat in there, I'm just going to pulse it a couple times just to blend it together. Kind of like making pie dough, but it's not even that complex. I don't use baking powder. I know some people do, but I found that you don't really need it. If you're doing the technique right, if you got your temperature right, the baking powder is really just kind of a cheat to get them to puff up. And that puff later when we cook them is really important because that's what gives you the light texture and character. But this water, we've got about 190 milliliters. That's barely over 3/4 of a cup. Goes in all at once, pre-salted, and we're done. It is now a pliable dough. It just sticks together. Okay, we're out of the machine with the dough, just on a very lightly floured surface, maybe just a touch more flour on the top. You don't have to really knead it much. All I'm going to do is work this into a log and break it down into 8 equal portions. I know there's a lot of tortilla videos already out there on the web, but I thought if I could do one really quick and show you exactly how easy this is, it would help encourage people to make your own. And I know you're saying, geez, they are so cheap at the grocery store, $3.50 for a pack of 10 in my neighborhood at least. But if you do the math on this, it works out to a whopping 6 cents a piece when you make them at home yourself. And again, the flavor is so much better. 6 cents a piece. I mean, come on, that's 1/5 the price of what you get in the grocery store. All I'm doing here, taking a cupped hand on a bare part of my work surface, I'm just using that cupped hand and I'm rolling it around to make a nice tight little dough ball here. And once you get into a little ball, set it over here on your surface to rest. We're going to cover those up with a little bit of cling film. And I've rested them for as short as 30 minutes and had good results. Again, it's all about getting that puff later on in the cooking process. But I've also done these up to 12 hours in advance. Done them in the morning, set the tray aside, and then come back to them when I was ready to make tacos that night. So once you get all your dough balls in there, cover it up with a little bit of cling film and come back to them after at least a 30-minute rest if not longer, depending on what your taco schedule is. Rolling these tortillas out couldn't be simpler. I find that a short piece of dowel, this is a 1.5 inch dowel, works a little bit better than a full-size rolling pin when you're trying to do little 5 and 6 inch circles. All I do is take one of my dough balls that's been well rusted, just a very lightly floured board. I'm going to pat it out just to get it started, and then I take my rolling pin, and standard rolling technique, you just do half turns until you get it out to the size you want. The other thing I do when I'm making a whole batch of these, I'll go to about that size. That's, oh, I don't know, probably what, 4.5 inches. And I'll let that rest for a few seconds while I get on to my next dough ball. Just again, a little tiny bit of flour. And you get kind of a production line going. I've gotten to a point now where I can make a batch of 8 of these in about 20 minutes if you don't count the dough resting time. And that dough resting time, not only over here on the plate, but in between your first and final rollings, really helps make the dough super easy to work with. Get it out to final size. And also you notice that my rolling technique emphasizes that perfectly round is not necessary for a good taco. So there we go. We got these rolled out. I'm going to go heat up the pan, and I'll show you how to fry them and how to make them puff up just right. I'm going to fry off one of these flour tortillas just to show you how it puffs up. And a lot of the experts will tell you to use a cast iron skillet, which does work really well. But if I'm making a quick batch of 8, it takes a little bit more time to get this heated up and to get the temperature consistent on it. And I've found that as long as you're careful with the temperatures, you can use a good old-fashioned non-stick skillet with really good effect. You just want to be careful with the non-stick coatings that you don't go above around 500 degrees, because that's when you start to get some dangerous off gases. So we're right about 440, 450. It's on my stove. It's a 7 out of 10, about a medium high, something along those lines. And I'm just going to grab my tortilla that I rolled out. I rolled it about an inch bigger than the final size I want, because I know I'm going to lose, you can probably see it there, you're going to lose a little bit of shrinkage. So I rolled it out to about a 7 inch. It's going to end up being about a 6.5 inch tortilla. And you can see I've got a timer going just so you can understand how long it takes for these to puff up. It's going to be about a minute and a half on the first side. And you're not going to see anything for the first, oh, I don't know, 20 or 30 seconds, but hopefully through the magic of video, you're going to see the puff. And the puff is really what you want for the light texture. The puff is the air expanding in between the layers, and it's going to end up giving you a lighter texture for your tacos, and a foldable taco, if you will. Also remember that after we're done with these, frying each one of these off, I'm going to go into a towel-lined basket, or in my case I'm just using my little tiny Dutch oven, and you're going to stack them up. You're going to get 5 or 6 in a stack in there, and the steam that you're holding in is really what finishes cooking these. You don't want to skip the step of storing them in a towel-lined basket, holding in that heat for, oh, I don't know, 20-25 minutes, because that really does finish and give you a good texture, keeps them from going too crispy, makes them nice and pliable. And as you can see, we're starting to get the puff here on the edge. If you don't have asbestos hands like me, you can use some kind of device, but it's really starting to do its thing, which is what we want. You can probably rewind and see how long it's taken that to happen, but this is probably, I don't know, 40-45 seconds. We're really getting the puff. What I'm watching is not only the puff, but also just looking at the color underneath to make sure I'm getting what I want there. And once it's ready, I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. And you get the super puff on the other side. It really goes nuts, but that's great because that's really beautiful, light, delicate texture. You can knock it down every so often so that it actually stays on the pan and cooks for you properly. Not going to be much more than about 30 seconds on the other side. I got the rest of those tortillas cooked off. As you can see, you can go on either end of the color spectrum, light and pale, or you can go darker. It's all personal preference. That's the beauty of making them yourself, is that you are in control, and I promise you they're going to taste better than those pale white versions you get in the plastic bags. I would be completely surprised if there are not lovely Mexican grandmothers out there just laughing themselves silly at my big goofy Canadian hands trying to make tortillas. That's okay. I bow to their wisdom. I would absolutely love for any and all of them to come up and teach me how to do better. Maybe even give me a good tamale recipe. For everybody else out there, do try a batch of these. Give yourself a little bit of extra time on the first batch that you make, because again, it's going to take you a little bit of practice. If you're having trouble with the puff, there's a couple places that you can look to fix that. Depending on your altitude or, I don't know, latitude or mindset, you may need a little bit of extra moisture in the dough, like an extra tablespoon of water in the dough. I live in a place at sea level with a lot of humidity, so you may need just a little bit more moisture in there. Also make sure that you're resting properly, resting not only as dough balls, but also in between your rolling, and get them nice and thin. And of course, the last thing, you really have to dial in the temperature specifically for your stove and pan. That took me a lot of tries to get it just right. I had plenty of failures at the start. Tasted good, but they didn't look very great. So do dial in that temperature perfectly well. These would make absolutely great tacos al carbon or tacos al pastor, but it's really early in the morning at the moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take one and I'm going to go with a little huevos action. I've got some eggs that I just fried off with some onions, some spiced mushrooms in there. This is the way to start your day. I've got a little bit of my own homemade Mexican crema. If you've never had Mexican crema, please go to my website and get the recipe. It is so simple. It's basically you pour buttermilk into cream and wait a couple of days. That's it. If you guys need me to do a video on that, just leave me a comment down below in the sections and I will get to it. But it works every single time, and it is so much better than sour cream or some of the other cultured cream products. I'm going to take a few of my spicy black beans just because I've got them. I made some gallo pinto yesterday and these are left over. And I'm even going to get myself a clean spoon for going into a quick little bit of salsa. This is an absolute delight to start my day. I do appreciate you guys liking and thumbs upping and tweety insta spacing and all that other crazy stuff. Please go up to the blog and get those recipes if you need them. Not only for the crema and the salsa and the gallo pinto, also the tortillas. Go read a little bit and you will find everything you need there. And of course, as always, if you haven't, please do subscribe to the channel because that's what lets me keep doing this for you. Until next time, I'm Mr. Spork. These are Mr. Spork's hands. Now I'm going to go have a little morning Mexican fiesta. Cheers.